Welcome to another edition of the Gig'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Robbie Faulk this week from Gene's page. Does a great job covering the Mississippi State Bulldogs, and he's here to give us a look at them. Robbie, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Andrew, thanks for having me, man. Good to be here.
So this obviously, just looking at Mississippi State, they've obviously already played one SEC game, but looking at the schedule, this kind of begins a bit of a gauntlet for them. A life in the SEC, I guess, with A&M, Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, and Georgia all coming up. What's kind of been the feeling or buzz around the program as they kind of get going this week against A&M?
Well, everybody believes that this is a huge stretch for State. This is one of the bigger stretches, at least in 3 or 4 games that they've had in a long time. When you're talking about, the future of Mike Leach, what's he going to be able to do at Mississippi State long term? How good can Mississippi State be under Mike Leach? All that kind of starts this week with Texas A&M, and it feels like this 3-game stretch, especially, is the most important stretch for Mike Leach since he's been here. You got 3 games that are winnable ball games, but they're very difficult ball games when you consider you got a top 25 team, top 20 team in Texas A&M, and then you got Arkansas coming up next week. Then you got to go to Kentucky, and you're going to lose to Alabama most likely. So these 3 games right here could be the difference in 8 or 9 wins or going 6-6. So starting it off strong is what has to happen for Mike Leach. I feel like he has to go 2-1 in this stretch, and that's going to be very difficult. But you do get 2 of those games at home, so we'll see what happens.
No doubt. This is obviously a really veteran roster. Jimbo Fisher mentioned it the other day that 20 out of the 22 kids on the top 22 are either redshirt juniors or fifth-year guys or sixth-year guys. What sort of benefit has that had for Mississippi State so far, or what do you think that could kind of mean over the next couple of weeks with just such a veteran roster?
I think it's important in games like this to have guys that have been there before. I mean, a lot of these guys that have been coming out on the field on Saturday played at Kyle Field last year. Will Rogers helped Mississippi State to win last year. A couple of those wide receivers, running backs, offensive linemen, those guys played in that kind of environment, and you played in a big SEC ball game. And most of those guys have played in the SEC now for 2.5 years. So that goes a long way. I mean, a lot of times experience in the SEC can beat talent in games like this, because if that talent's only been playing for a couple of games, they haven't got their feet wet. I'm taking the guy that's been there for 4 years over the guy that's a 5-star, at least in year one, because they've experienced the SEC. They know what it's like playing in front of 100,000 people. They know what it's like going to Kyle Field and winning a ball game. So I think it's going to be big for them. I think that's what was so disappointing to see for State fans in that LSU game, for them not to be able to handle that environment. That was disappointing, but we'll see if that was just kind of an anomaly, and those players could come out and handle the situation a little bit better this week. I think this is going to be a really good test for them at the start of this 4-game gauntlet that they're going to. If they can come out in this ball game and handle that situation well and take care of business, I think that's going to be a good step in the right direction for them.
You mentioned that LSU game, kind of got off to the start you would want to get off to if you're a Mississippi State player or coach, and then, kind of felt like, some inconsistency the rest of the way. What were the primary issues in that game, and looking ahead to this one as well?
I don't think they handled the adjustments from LSU's defense very well in that. I don't think they took advantage when they needed to take advantage. They had opportunities to build that lead, and LSU, quite frankly, was doing nothing on offense. You got a 13-0 lead with 2 minutes left, a little under 2 minutes left before halftime. You let LSU drive right down the field and score right before the half. And then you pretty much had control of it in the second half. You muff a punt inside the 5. I think the biggest issue was just lack of focus and execution. State was good enough to win that ball game. They weren't as talented as LSU at all these positions, but they were good enough to win the game. Even as badly as the offense played, they should have won that ball game. So I don't think they handled the atmosphere well. I don't think they handled anything well in that ball game on the offensive side of the ball after the first possession. So really is just the lack of execution and just not stepping up when they needed to step up was a real big issue for them.
No doubt. And, you mentioned Will Rogers earlier, obviously heading into basically his third year starting now is off to another really good start to the year. What areas have you seen him continue to grow, and what are maybe those areas he can still improve on?
I think he's gotten a lot better at getting the ball down the field. A lot of people his first 2 years talked about the fact that he wasn't throwing the ball past 10 yards. Well, now he leads the country in touchdown passes beyond 20 yards. He's got 5 of those. He's got a pretty high completion percentage and passer rating. So he's developing as a passer. He's always been a guy that's had a high completion percentage. He's completed a lot of his passes, over 70% in his career. That has never been an issue for him. The way that he can grow now is getting the ball down the field a little more for some more dynamic plays, reading the defense a little better pre-snap and going through his progressions. And I think he's gotten better at that for the most part. I didn't think he did a great job at that against LSU, but I think as a whole he's gotten better at that. And he's just developing as a passer. He's gotten a lot better. There's some limitations for him physically. He's not going to be the fastest guy. He's not going to scramble for a lot of yards and get outside the pocket a whole lot. But he makes up for that, I think, with his brain. And I think he just is a lot better at making decisions than a lot of other quarterbacks. So, there's some, like I said, deficiencies physically. But overall, he's a really good quarterback.
No doubt. And when you look at it, obviously Mississippi State, as to be expected under Mike Leach and that air raid offense, isn't run the ball a ton. Have had some success when they have. If they look to kind of use Will Rogers on some of those short passes to kind of get some chunk play or get some short yardage plays and get into field position, or what have you kind of seen there in terms of the way he's been able to manage the offense on that side?
Yeah, you'll see them use the running game or use the passing game almost as an extension of the running game, the short swing passes or things like that. But I think they've done a better job this year focusing a little more on the running game to allow the offense to kind of blossom a little more. I think whenever you're just showing that you're going to run a draw play every now and then, and most of your offense is just going to be patterning around passing the football, it's going to be tough to keep a defense honest. And this year, I think they've done a better job at getting Dylan Johnson and Jaquavius Marks more involved in the running game and not just using them to block or using them out of the backfield as, the last resort with a dump-off pass. That we saw the last 2 weeks that they've had the 3 longest rushing plays in Mike Leach's tenure. They had 2 30-yard plays against LSU. One of them was a 34, 35-yard run, I think, from Marks for a touchdown. Dylan Johnson had a big run, and then Dylan Johnson had a 37-yard run last week too. So the rushing attack is starting to develop a little more, I think, for Mississippi State, and that's good for Mike Leach's offense. I don't think that just dropping back and passing it 60 times is going to be effective in this league. You're going to have to add in the run. 25 carries from your running backs, averaging 5 yards a rush, per game. If you do that in a game, I think that's going to take this offense a long way.
No doubt. We'll be back right after a quick break to kind of look at the defensive side of the ball and talk some keys to this game as well. Welcome back into the Gig 'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Robbie Faulk. Robbie, A&M, obviously, it's been well documented so far this year, has been inconsistent to say the least offensively. I think that would be putting it kindly. What do you think will be the focus this week for Zach Arnett as they look to maybe attack A&M?
I'm really interested to see what the game plan is. I mean, Arnett is a guy that by nature is going to be pretty aggressive on the defensive side of the ball. looking at A&M, if I'm Zach Arnett, I'm trying to stop A-Chain first and foremost. That's a guy that you cannot let establish the running game for A&M and break off these big rushes like he had against Arkansas. Had a huge game against Arkansas, and he had a big game last year against State too. He had some big runs, and I thought A&M was running the football pretty well against State last year. So for me, it's not exactly stopping the run because I don't know if that's going to be possible to just straight up stop A&M's run game. I'm going to try to limit those big plays from A-Chain in the rushing attack and try to keep him at 4 yards a carry or something if that's possible, and just limit him there. And I'm going to make Max Johnson beat me. I'm going to make him make some throws, make some big time throws, which he can. But I feel a lot better forcing the game into Max Johnson's hands than letting A&M establish a run game, wear down the defensive line, and really attack Mississippi State from that level. And I think State's been solid against the run. The numbers don't really bear it out because they're probably somewhere around top 50 in the rushing defense category. But a lot of those have been some big plays, and State's defense can give up some big plays. But you have to keep that rushing attack in front of you. You can't be chasing those guys all over the field. And I'm just going to try my best to force A&M to being a passing offense.
You think they start to mix up fronts? We've seen Arkansas do that a little bit, and some others do that as well. Do you think we could see them kind of mix up fronts as well?
They could. They're mostly going to run a 3-man front, but you'll see there's times where you have 4 guys on the line of scrimmage and 3 of them are standing up. I mean, they're going to try to give them a few different looks with that 3-man front, and they'll bring down Tyrus Wheat sometimes on the line of scrimmage and play him almost like a defensive end. The linebackers have been really good against the run. So I'm interested to see that matchup between the two teams. But like I said, I mean, I thought A&M was having success running the football against State last year and busted off a few big plays. And that's something that you have to watch in this ball game. I think one area that could really hurt State in this game is if they try to pressure Max Johnson too much and you're leaving those safeties on the island with those 4- and 5-star receivers. Because I don't think State's been exceptionally well in one-on-one coverage with their safeties. So, and that's what you'll find sometimes when State brings pressure from different areas. You'll find that the quarterback's able to get the ball off, and there's a safety one-on-one with one of the team's best receivers, and it usually comes back to haunt State. So I think. As strange as it sounds, I think that if State is pressuring Max Johnson, he could have more success than if he's just seemingly just standing there in the pocket and throwing the ball around.
Interesting, because he's obviously been under a lot of pressure these first couple of weeks. That he's been under center. When you look at the keys to the game, whether it's offensive or defensive side for State, what do you kind of see as the keys?
I think one of them is limiting the run. Like I said, I think that's first and foremost what State has to do on the defensive side of the ball, and bend but don't break. When you're getting them, if A&M's getting inside the red zone, force field goals, keep them to 3 points. And for State's offense, I think it's just execution. They didn't have the execution against LSU. They're going to face a defense that is as talented and that can do a lot of the same things that LSU was able to do. DJ Durkin had some success against State last year at Ole Miss, so I know he's probably going to have a good game plan in this ball game. State's got to be able to execute. They can't get behind the chains, can't drop passes. They had 5 drops against LSU. They didn't execute on those drives, but they came up empty. So the biggest thing for State offensively is just make sure that you're doing your job. Protect well, get the ball out in time, don't have those penalties, don't have those drops.
And just on the red zone defense front, looking at the stats for this game and looking at how State's performed, it looks like they've had a lot of trouble, defending in the red zone, specifically giving up touchdowns. What have been the primary issues? Is it just the way teams have attacked them? And I think they were giving up touchdowns in over 75% as of right now.
Yeah, I don't know how many. I hadn't looked at those numbers. I know against Arizona and Memphis. I don't know how many chances they got, and Bowling Green as well. The Bowling Green might have got one chance inside the red zone. I'm not sure, but against LSU, LSU had a couple of trips inside the red zone, and they just lost contain on Jaden Daniels and didn't kind of spy him out because whenever State pressured him, he just stepped up in the pocket and ran. So I didn't think the game plan was very good against him. That was kind of the issue, but State's defense for the most part has been solid. They just have to make sure they limit these big plays because there hasn't been a ton of trips inside the red zone. The big plays is really the biggest concern, I think.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, great insight. Won't get any better insight from anybody other than you. So really appreciate you joining us on the podcast to give a look at Mississippi State.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on. Hope we have a good crowd this weekend from both sides. I know this is it's so interesting to me because both these teams wear maroon. They both have similar jerseys. I mean, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the two, but it's kind of turned into a budding rivalry since they've joined the SEC. It's been kind of fun to watch.
No doubt, it really has been. It's going to be fascinating. Two teams that I think match up pretty similarly. Should be a really good one, and huge stretches for both sides. And A&M's got Alabama right afterwards as well. So huge stretches for both sides, and we'll of course be back to break it down next week and look ahead to that matchup with Alabama. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, be sure to give us a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button to get a notification every time a new video drops. And until next time, have a great week, everyone, and we'll be back soon.